Hey, have you ever felt that chill in your stomach? You know what I mean? That uneasy feeling creeping up your chest, that tightness in your gut, that little voice in your head whispering, what if it doesn't work out? What if they laugh at me? What if I fail miserably? I know you've been there. I have too. And I'd bet even the most confident people you know have felt that same fear at some point. Fear is universal. It doesn't care about your age, gender, or job. But here's the good news. It doesn't have to run your life. Today, I want to show you how to conquer fear in a way that genuinely transforms who you are and how you live. And to do that, I've brought in some serious backup. The ideas of Aristotle, one of history's greatest thinkers. Don't worry though, this won't be a boring philosophy lecture full of complicated terms. I promise to break it all down into something simple, light, straightforward, and, most importantly, practical and useful for your everyday life. If you're tired of letting fear hold you back and want to learn how to live with more courage, confidence, and freedom, stick with me until the end. Together, we'll figure out how to turn this emotion that feels like a roadblock into something that pushes you forward. Ready? Let's dive in. What fear is and why it's not your enemy. First things first, let's get clear on what fear actually is. It's not some villain that popped up just to mess with you, you know? Fear is a natural emotion, almost like an internal alarm system that nature gave us to keep us safe. Think about our ancestors back in the cave days. Fear made them run from a saber-toothed tiger or steer clear of a dangerous cliff. Without it, humanity probably wouldn't have lasted this long. But times have changed. We're not dodging predators or fighting for survival every day anymore. Even so, fear still shows up, just in different situations now. Before a big presentation at work, when you're deciding whether to move to a new city, when you're thinking about picking up a new hobby, or even when you need to say no to someone. The trouble is, most of the time, this fear isn't about a real threat. It's about something we imagine might go wrong. Aristotle, this Greek philosopher who lived over 300 years before Christ, had a brilliant take on this. He called it the golden mean, the idea that everything in life needs balance. Too much fear paralyzes you. You get stuck, avoid risks, and don't move forward. Too little fear throws you to the other extreme. You become reckless, acting without thinking and potentially hurting yourself. The trick, according to Aristotle, is finding the middle ground, feeling the fear, acknowledging it's there, but not letting it take over. It's like tuning the volume on a song, not so loud it deafens you, but not so quiet you can't hear the melody. How about we learn to find that balance together? Courage isn't the absence of fear, it's acting despite it. Let's bust a common myth right now. A lot of people think being courageous means never feeling fear, like brave folks are superheroes with steady hearts and dry palms. But that's not true at all. The most courageous people in the world, those who tackle huge challenges, change their lives, or chase their dreams, feel fear too. The difference? They don't let fear call the shots. Aristotle explained this beautifully. To him, true courage isn't about not having fear. It's about acting even when you're scared. Think of someone you admire for their bravery. Maybe it's a friend who made a bold life change, or even a movie character. I'd bet that at some point they felt that pit in their stomach, that urge to give up. But they pushed forward anyway. So next time you feel that knot in your gut before speaking in public, or that anxiety before making a big decision, remember this. Fear's there, and that's okay. It's not a sign to stop, it's just a noisy passenger in your car. The question is, are you going to let it drive, or are you going to take the wheel and steer your own path? The danger of extremes, neither coward nor reckless. Aristotle was all about balance, and he constantly warned about the dangers of going to extremes. When it comes to fear, he saw two sides that can mess you up: cowardice and recklessness. Let's break them down. First, cowardice. It's when fear grows so big it turns into a giant monster in your mind. You start avoiding anything that feels like a challenge. Want to switch jobs? Nah, what if I don't fit in? Want to try something new? What if I'm terrible at it? So you stay stuck in your comfort zone, a place that feels safe, but deep down, keeps you from growing and really living. On the flip side, there's recklessness. It's when you ignore fear entirely and dive in headfirst without a second thought, like quitting everything to start a business with no plan or taking on a challenge without preparing. It might look like courage at first glance, but Aristotle would call it foolishness in disguise. The sweet spot, which he called virtue, is where the magic happens. Being courageous means knowing when to push forward and when to hold back, weighing the risks calmly and acting with purpose. How do we get there? With practice, self-awareness, and a little patience with ourselves. You become what you do repeatedly. Here's one of Aristotle's most powerful lines. We are what we repeatedly do. Excellence, then, is not an act, but a habit. What's that got to do with fear? Everything. Courage isn't something you're born with. It's something you build step by step through the choices you make every day. Think about it. If you run from fear every time it shows up, you're training yourself to be afraid. But if you face it, even just a little at a time, you're training yourself to be brave. And the best part? You don't have to start with massive challenges. How about some small warm-ups? For instance, if you're scared of public speaking, start by chatting more with coworkers or tossing out a comment in a meeting. If you're afraid of messing up, try something new, like cooking a tricky recipe, even if it might burn the first time. Every time you act, even with fear tagging along, it's like adding a brick to your courage wall. Over time, that wall gets so tall that fears that once seemed like mountains turn into pebbles in your path. Most of your fears are pure imagination. Let's do a quick exercise. Think of a fear that's kept you up at night lately. Maybe it was, what if I fail that project? Or, what if I say something dumb and everyone laughs? Now tell me, how many times did that awful scenario you pictured actually happen? I'd bet that, most of the time, it was just your mind playing tricks on you. Aristotle figured this out over 2,000 years ago. He said our emotions, like fear, need to be guided by reason because we've got this habit of cooking up catastrophic stories that almost never come true. It's like our brain's a horror movie screenwriter, dreaming up tragic endings that never make it to the screen. So when fear knocks, pause for a second and ask yourself, is this fear based on facts or just my imagination running wild? What's the real chance of this happening? And if it does, is it really the end of the world? More often than not, you'll see your suffering in advance. And just that realization can lift some of the weight off your shoulders. Knowledge is your best weapon against fear. You know that fear that ties your stomach in knots just thinking about the unknown? Like starting a new class, traveling somewhere unfamiliar, or facing a job interview? Aristotle had a fix for that. He said fear often comes from ignorance. When we don't know what to expect, our brain fills in the blanks with the worst possible outcomes. The good news? There's a simple, powerful weapon against it. Knowledge. The more you understand something, the less scary it gets. Nervous about an interview? Research the company, look up common questions, and practice your answers in the mirror. Afraid of driving? Practice on quiet streets until you feel at ease behind the wheel. It's like turning on a flashlight in a dark room. Suddenly, those shadowy shapes that look like monsters turn out to be just a chair or a coat rack. When you're prepared and know what you're up against, fear shrinks, and you take charge. You won't overcome fear just by thinking. You have to act. Aristotle was a practical guy. He believed that sitting around reflecting, planning, or daydreaming doesn't change anything. It's action that does the trick. You can spend hours thinking, I need to get over this fear, or I wish I were braver. But if you don't take that first step, nothing shifts. Here's the challenge. Don't wait for fear to fade before you act. Go with the fear. Feeling unsure about asking for a raise? Schedule that talk with your boss and do it. Jittery about starting a project? Grab a blank page and write the first line. Courage doesn't come before action. It's born in the middle of it. It's in the doing, in the mess of it all, that you find out what you're made of. And every time you act, fear loses a bit of its grip on you. Use reason to balance your emotions. When fear hits, it's easy to get swept away. Your heart races, your palms sweat, and suddenly it feels like the world's crashing down. But Aristotle had a trick for that. Use reason as a brake on your emotions. He said we shouldn't be slaves to what we feel. Our minds can and should step in to put things in perspective. Next time fear shows up, try this. Take a deep breath, step back mentally, and ask, does this fear make sense? What are the real odds of something bad happening? And if it does, can I handle it? Say you're scared of speaking up in a meeting. Ask, what's the worst that could happen? Maybe you stumble over a word or forget something. So what? No one's firing you over that, and you'll get better with time. This little reasoning exercise helps you see fear for what it is, an overblown emotion that usually paints an uglier picture than reality. And bit by bit, you learn to tame it with calm and logic. Accept fear as part of the process. Here's a truth that might shift how you see things. Fear's never going to vanish completely, and that's not a bad thing. Aristotle knew emotions like fear are part of being human. They come with the package. What matters is what you do with them. Think about it. Fear hits hardest when you're stepping out of your comfort zone, trying something new, or facing a challenge. And what does that mean? You're growing. That flutter in your stomach before a big change, that nervous buzz before a bold move. It's all a sign you're living, risking, evolving. So next time it shows up, don't fight it. Welcome it and say, hey, fear, you're tagging along? Cool, but I'm the one in charge here. We've reached the end, and now I want to ask you, what fear are you going to face today? It doesn't have to be something huge. It could be sending a message to someone you've been putting off, trying a new recipe, or speaking your mind in a conversation. The important thing is to take that first step, because every time you act despite your fear, you become stronger, more confident, more you. Aristotle taught us that courage is a muscle. The more you use it, the more it grows. And the life you want, the one full of possibilities, adventures, and achievements, is on the other side of these small acts of bravery. If these ideas inspired you, check out if you're subscribed. There will probably be videos that explore ways to live with more courage and purpose, one day at a time. And remember this, you don't have to be perfect, nor do you have to wait for the ideal moment. You just have to start. So go ahead. What are you going to do now?